Welcome to hour number 2 of a Thursday live right here on the early line, all across the SportsGrid network. He is Donnie right side. I am Ben Stevens. It's hour number 2, but time is flying by as we try to wrap our head around all of the news that we have seen in the coaching carousel in the last 24 hours. Again, Donnie, I don't believe it's hyperbole to say that in the last 24 hours, 3 head coaches in their respective organizations in their specific sports have defined the last 20 years plus of football as we know it. Early this morning, the expected news out of Foxborough at some point this week that Bill Belichick and the Patriots would agree to part ways. We got that news before 8 a.m. Eastern time as we started here on this Thursday on the early line. So that was expected, but again, a sign of the times and end of an era for New England. What is next for Bill Belichick? We will discuss after 24 years as the Pats head coach. But yesterday, 2 stunning moves. First, it was Pete Carroll. After 14 NFL seasons, he is out as the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, the winningest all-time head coach in Seattle in their tenure together. And then in college football, the greatest to ever do it after 28 years as a college football head coach, the past 17 in Tuscaloosa. Nick Saban is retiring as a head coach at Alabama. 7 national championships in his time in college football, 6 with the Crimson Tide, 1 with the Bayou Bengals of LSU, the most successful college football head coach we have ever seen.
Yeah, these guys have been around for a long time, but even like during my childhood growing up, sometimes you just think things will never end, like Penn State, Joe Paterno, Bobby Bowden, Florida State, like 20, 30, 40 years at an institution, hundreds of wins here. Almost a shock to yourself when you see things changing because, again, I didn't grow up in the Nick Saban era of Alabama. I was already an adult, but there's some kids down there in the South like, hey, I just started becoming Alabama, at age 5, and that's all I knew throughout my life was Nick Saban being at Alabama here. You take a look at the professional sports here with the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick saying the same thing as a kid growing up, like, hey, all I knew through my entire adult life was Bill Belichick was the head coach of the New England Patriots, synonymous with winning here. As we welcome in the radio audience, you're watching and listening live to the Early Line Thursday morning edition here, Sirius XM channel 159. He's Ben. I'm Donnie. Just the coaching changes here. Fundamental. Sometimes, Ben, you just think it never ends here, but sooner or later, good times have to change here, and we're getting that turnover here from some of the all-time great coaches in NCAA football and professional ranks.
That is for sure. Plenty of more reaction on Nick Saban. We'll speak to a guy up next. Normally, I have no idea what Rick Horrow is going to say, our sports professor, but he has sat down with Nick Saban numerous times. We'll talk about his legacy in college football and at Alabama. But we start with the big news of this day. Bill Belichick and New England have parted ways. After 24 NFL seasons together and 6 Super Bowl championships, the most ever in NFL history, it will be a new era in Foxborough. It will be a new stop on the resume for Bill Belichick. 29 years as a head coach in the National Football League. 5 with the Cleveland Browns, where, oh, by the way, his defensive coordinator for a good part of that tenure was Nick Saban. 24 years in New England. Bill Belichick with 302 regular season wins, 31 playoff wins, 333 in total, is only 14 total wins behind Don Shula for the most wins ever in the history of the National Football League by a head coach. So let's start with the Bill Belichick perspective of this timeline. He is not done coaching based on reports around the NFL this morning. So where to next for Bill Belichick, Donnie?
It's going to be interesting. And again, there are some franchises out here in dire need of a guy like Bill Belichick. I mean, heck, anybody would probably like him to be your head coach. Here's the issue with it. You saw what happened in New England. Now, for years and years and years, it was Bill Belichick and it was Tom Brady. And they always used to say, you know what? Free agency doesn't matter to us. Losers buy the first few days of free agency. We sit back, we pick up the pieces, get devalued options. But I have Tom Brady and I have my mind on defense. We will always be talented. The minute Tom Brady left, Bill Belichick spent like a drunken sailor on the free agent market to try to recreate, Hernandez at tight end along with Gronkowski and just buy multiple tight ends. That didn't work here. Drafting young quarterbacks, that didn't work either. So that's why you're seeing year after year as you get farther away from Tom Brady, what does Bill Belichick actually bring to the table? Not as a head coach, Ben, but as a guy that's going to control the entire front office where he's picking his guys. But some of these organizations, again, as I talked about, the Commanders and the Carolina Panthers, they would say, yes, Bill, come in here. You can run the entire football operation with a blank check here. Just please save us from this embarrassment here. So I look at teams that, let's just say, like the Chargers, who, the Spanos family, they're not going to let him get full control of that organization. If I'm looking at being optimistic, maybe even an Arthur Blank down in Atlanta that says, look, we're ready to win here, Bill. You've won before. We have the infrastructure and the money. You can do whatever you want. I do believe we're looking on the East Coast here for Bill Belichick. Now, I laugh about maybe the shot with the Raiders makes some sense, but if we're going up and down the East Coast, it's Washington, it's Carolina, and it's Atlanta for me, Ben.
So there are 8 head coaching vacancies now around the National Football League, including the Patriots after parting ways with Bill Belichick. And, of course, yesterday, Seattle letting go of Pete Carroll as their head coach. He will work in an advisory role as of this moment with the franchise. But, of course, there is a head coaching vacancy. So now 8 around the National Football League. Mike Vrabel was one of those guys. He played and worked under Bill Belichick in New England. Would he be in consideration for the Patriots head coaching spot? Right now, Gerard Mayo, a former New England linebacker as well. He has worked as the linebackers coach under Bill Belichick the past few seasons. He is seen to be the front runner to replace his former skipper as the head man in Foxborough. And I bring all of this up, Donnie, because one of the head coaching vacancies we might have expected, at least for a good majority of 2023's NFL season, did not come to reality yesterday. Matt Eberflus will remain as the head coach for the Chicago Bears after 2 seasons in the Windy City. He will see year number 3, despite just a 10-24 overall record in the last 2 years. But it did end rather optimistically for the Bears in 2023. Chicago, Donnie, won 5 of their final 8 games of this past regular season.
Yeah, and the Chicago Bears said the reason they hired Matt Eberflus is they wanted him to be the CEO head coach. And he does have a defensive background, and it was a defensive coordinator, but they wanted offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators. And granted, he didn't lose the locker room. Those guys played hard. They just didn't have enough talent here. So they're going to try to say, okay, he has the locker room. Let's add the talent. Let's get an up-and-coming coordinator. We'll probably draft number 1 overall here at quarterback, and this should be a guy to take us into the new millennium. But if you are a Chicago Bears fan, and guys like Jim Harbaugh come back to the NFL, and Belichick is out there, and you're saying to yourself, how could we have not upgraded our position here? And that could be a big loss in the future. I don't mind Eberflus coming back, but there's a lot of intriguing talent out there to bring in as your head coach at this point.
It is a very interesting offseason for Chicago. You saw the sweeping changes offensively as a part of Eberflus's staff. Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator the past 2 years with Justin Fields, is now out. Chicago's next test, of course, and the question they have to answer, what will they do with that number 1 overall pick for the 2024 NFL Draft? Our sports professor, Rick Horrow, joins us up next.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, a Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The Weiss said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
Take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, your mind. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars had, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. It's not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Live right here on this Thursday on the early line on SportsGrid. I am Ben Stevens. Donnie right side, of course, is here. Now the man in the middle, it is our sports professor, Rick Horrow. Oftentimes we have no idea what he is going to say when he comes on the SportsGrid airwaves. Today, though, he serves an actual purpose because Rick Horrow has sat down with Nick Saban. Rick Horrow knows the NFL circles and what might be next for Bill Belichick. So our sports professor, thank you for joining us here on this Thursday.
The Pandora's box just opened. Serves an actual purpose, huh? All right, good. I'm going to remember that. Wrong side. Would you agree with that I have not served an actual purpose until today?
I mean, this might be your big, like all executives are watching you right now, Rick. So be careful. This is a big moment for you.
Uh-oh. All right.
100%.
Well, what do you want?
What
do you want?
We're not here to learn about the economic impact of the Paris Olympics in 2024. We're here to talk about actual things on this Thursday morning. So, Rick, on the record, one of your programs here that airs on the SportsGrid network, you have sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you by the news that Nick Saban is retiring at the age of 72?
Very. Although I was in Tuscaloosa and I saw in the dark of night people working on his statue to raise it a couple of inches above Bear Bryant's at the hall there. So we figured something was going on. He is an amazing individual. I had a little chip on my shoulder that I confronted him pretty early off the air about being, leaving the Dolphins where he left the Dolphins. But he's not a pro coach, and he admits that he's not a pro coach. And there's rumors that he's going to the Falcons. Forget that. I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised, athletic department surprised, talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning, very surprised. Didn't see it coming. And by the way, one comment about the three goats, the goat farm. Pete Carroll, Belichick, and Saban, they're all at or over 70. I just want to be standing at 70. These guys look like they have 10 or 15 or 20 more years left in them. So you got to realize that the grind they have, give them a little bit of a break. Congratulations, Bill Belichick. May you retire, go to the Hall of Fame. Don't coach anymore, man. Don Shula wants that record. He said spiritually, don't coach anymore. Don't coach anymore. How's that? Is that okay?
What happens if he goes down there, Rick, and gets goes to Shula's Steakhouse, eats a steak, and then beats the record here? Some things looking up there for the Miami Dolphins. By the way,
won't do that.
let me ask you a question on this. Nick Saban steps away from Alabama. Obviously wasn't fired. Bill Belichick, as we're told, mutual parting of the ways. Contract talks here with time left on that contract and a lot of money. Rick, how does that work here? Does Nick Saban just say, okay, I'm going to retire. You guys don't owe me any more money? And the same thing with Bill Belichick moving on. Is there any money that still changes hands, or is that just, you know what, we didn't fire you, so we don't owe you anything?
Well, I'm going to contrast this to the Amy Adams Strunk firing of Vrabel, who, by the way, Mike Vrabel is now the FSU of coaches. He went from being the darling hire to maybe now number 4, number 5, but below the 3 GOATs and Harbaugh. So what bad timing for this, right? So anyway, the bottom line is, if you fire somebody and you announce they're firing somebody, there goes any chance of your leverage. So I suspect, and I don't know this, but I suspect the bottom line of the Saban on the administrative side at Alabama, as well as the Belichick side, you have conversations. You talk about the money. You talk about whether you want to do a deal to be a front office or an advisor or a consultant, and you figure out how to spread the money, forgive some, take some, and it was a negotiation. We may never know. And if I'm the agent, I probably want to keep it quiet, because you could say it's nobody's business. These are GOATs who step away, and I know they're going to save money relative to paying everybody. See that, Tennessee Titans. But it gives you the ability to preserve the legacy, and it's not always about money. 98% about money, but not 100%.
So after this morning, in the big news out of Foxborough, that Bill Belichick is moving on as the head coach of the New England Patriots, Rick, there are now 8 NFL head coaching vacancies around the league. The Patriots, the Seahawks, the Commanders, Chargers, Raiders, Panthers, Falcons, and those Tennessee Titans. I ask you a 2-part question. Of those 8 NFL head coaching openings, from a market standpoint, which job do you believe is the most attractive? And of those 8 ownership groups, who do you think is willing to pony up the most?
I don't count the Commanders as one of the 8 because they've been relegated to minor leagues. That doesn't matter. Now, seriously, of all of those deals, I really think Raiders, Chargers, Southern California, big media, maybe Mark Davis gets talked into giving another person significant equity, although I think the John Gruden example is we're not doing that. But I think the high media areas, I was even thinking, Saban to Alabama, that doesn't go anywhere. Saban doesn't go back to the pros. What this does is it matches up all of these top markets, and everybody who wants to be in the game all of a sudden is in the game. I remember when Steve Ross was looking at Harbaugh for not the Dolphins, but his other toy, or his other preference is Michigan. And before Harbaugh went, everybody was tracking the plane number to find out where Steve Ross was to get Harbaugh from Stanford. So now the hunt really begins. Now, you can't give equity to a coach, but you can certainly give future considerations. And this will be the highest bidder. Again, Vrabel is going to get dollars higher than he would have 3 days ago because the bidding has gone up because of these 2 magicians who may come in. But again, he's not number 1. Now he's number 4. So we'll see.
Rick, by the way, bidding going up in all sports here appears for coaches. We saw Greg Popovich with a massive extension in San Antonio. You also had Monty Williams, a massive new contract for the Detroit Pistons. And now we saw yesterday Eric Spoelstra, 8 years, $120 million here. Talk about that. I mean, you want to be a coach? My goodness, out here. It pays.
Well, first of all, wrong side. You're in the wrong field because you keep telling me about your athletic accomplishments. You should be a coach. I mean, I'd write a letter, the doctor's letter, letting you out of school because you're a life coach. Well, you picked the wrong life. That's the bottom line. Listen, if you're a COO of an organization, you deserve the dollars. And these are not public companies because you can't get stock. So the next best thing is, at all of these levels, you get significant dollars to manage high ego guys. And I don't care what people say. Coaching today is a lot harder than coaching before. You've got a guy, especially in basketball, who are making 10 times the money you are, and you better get along with people in addition to knowing X's and O's. So I'm not a shill for coaches, but I will say if you're going to pay athletes X, you got to pay coaches near X.
So this was my fault, saying that Rick Horrow would serve a purpose. I take the blame for that, trying to coach Donnie on what he should do in his career. Donnie, I don't know if you noticed, as you were beautifully setting up a question to get Rick's insight and analysis, he was trying to get you to speed up to mention Eric Spoelstra. This guy thinks he can do everybody's job.
He wants the spotlight. He wants the spotlight.
He knows the execs are watching right now.
And do it well. Not only do it, but do it well, just so you understand.
All right, so listen, you're going to get your final minute because I'm going to tee you up for a question about the NFL playoffs, how good the bracket looks right now around the postseason. But mainly, Rick, Saturday night, an exclusive game on Peacock. Why is there such an emphasis on Peacock for the National Football League here as of late? Final minute is yours.
Oh, my God, that's great. So this is the first time you've ever teed me up and gave me any time to really make a difference out of the tee up. Here's the answer. The answer is no, not TikTok. The answer is Amazon. The answer is Peacock or any of the other networks. The NFL created a significant overvalue of their bidding by creating an outlier. They started with DirecTV years ago. Nobody knew who they were. All of a sudden, they become real. What does it do? It scares the existing networks into bidding higher than they otherwise would. More money for the players, more money for the league. They did it again. But the bottom line is they decided to cross the Rubicon by saying for the first time, we're actually going to limit access to a playoff game, and we're going to do it quickly. And that's the reason why the NFL is doing Peacock. Does it make sense nationally? It's going to be significant problems, especially watching it in the cold, but there's no better way to do it than watch it. And right after you come back, people are going to hear the predictions. So don't go anywhere.
That was a good tease.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, a Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
favorite. I don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression, not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
So much has happened in the last 24 hours, and on this Thursday morning live right here on the early line on SportsGrid, I feel like I haven't even mentioned a spread or an over-under all show long. We'll do that now live right here on this Thursday, as we are just 2 days away from an actual football game being played once again. Super Wild Card Weekend, the opening round of the NFL playoffs. 6 matchups spread over 3 days, a doubleheader on Saturday. Triples is best, 3 on Sunday, and a Monday Night Football finale as well out in Florida. We go to the Sunshine State to find the hardest working man at the Spiz Grizz, the hardest working man in showbiz. A cup of Joe on this morning is necessary because Joe Raineri will be hosting Game Time Decisions for a second consecutive night here on the grid at 6 p.m. Eastern time as well. Joe, how do you find time to do it all?
It's amazing. I mean, but listen, I thought whoever would replace Saban had a tough job ahead of them. You bring me in after Rick Horrow. I don't know how. I mean, you guys just setting me up to fail here. So I'll do my best. I don't know if I can hang with that. So I'm here though for you.
Joe, a little peek behind the curtain. As Rick came on, I was actually excited to hear from him as he has sat down multiple times with Nick Saban. And I said our sports professor serves an actual purpose today. I'm not so sure he did, but you always do, as we will look at the early lines for Super Wild Card Weekend. We go in chronological order. First game up on Saturday. As Donnie likes to say, it's the Texans' time slot when they reach the postseason. 4:30 p.m. Eastern time to kick off Super Wild Card Weekend and the doubleheader. The Texans host the Cleveland Browns. Bookends of the weekend. Saturday to start, Monday night in Tampa. The wild card seed, the top wild card seed in its conference, is a road favorite against a divisional champion from the South Conference. The Cleveland Browns, a 2.5-point road favorite in Houston against the Texans, over under 44.5. Joe, how do you expect Super Wild Card Weekend to begin?
So it's interesting here because this was 2.5. It shot up to 3. Now it's back down to 2.5. I'm not quite sure what folks think we're going to be getting in this game, but we did see. Don't forget, a couple of weeks back we saw this, right? I think December 24th, Christmas Eve. In fact, we had gotten this, and it was no C.J. Stroud. It was Case Keenum, but the idea is the same here. Whether it's Stroud, whether it's Keenum, whether it's me, whether it's you under center, Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith are going to be putting a ton of pressure on this team. Keeping in mind that this Cleveland team, while yes, Flacco is a crazy story here, Cleveland's 8-1 straight up and 7-2 against the number as a favorite this year. They're also taking on the Texans, who are just 4-5 against the number when playing at home. So this is not a great home field advantage. You've got a rookie quarterback, first time in a playoffs, going up against a wily vet, against one of the best defenses in the league. When we've seen Stroud play top defenses this year, the points were not coming. He's not the same quarterback. This is a Browns victory here. The question is, by how much, really?
Yeah, it's a good point also to bring up that you take a look at last week, a high leverage situation for Houston, which they won. That was a big emotional win to win the division and make the playoffs. Cleveland sat that one out last week and took a bye week here. We, as you said, we saw some really good success by Flacco in that offense, already taking on the Texans. Let's flip it over to Saturday night, which it's a great matchup, Miami and Kansas City. But you know what's even greater here? It looks like the conditions, Joe, are deteriorating as we speak. Yesterday, we're taking a look at, hey, look, it's going to be 4 or 5 degrees. We're now showing -1 and -2. Not wind chill temps, actual air temperatures at the start of this ball game. A total that's at 45.5 and a favorite here for Kansas City at -4.5. I know they say here, and I want to set you up on this. Oh, Miami plays in what? Nobody plays in minus 15 wind chill. So nobody's going to have an advantage in this one as if they're used to it. How do you think this game plays out?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you look at this game and you're saying, wow, it's going to be 1 degree. But the problem is we're not going to have the same kind of wind issue that we might in Buffalo, right? So what we're seeing here is the total. Well, it's rising. 43 and a half. Now we're up to 44 and a half here. And I think that's telling. And don't forget, they installed in Kansas City, the actual playing surface is heated. So this isn't like an ice ball where, while, yes, it is going to be beyond cold, the ground is, there's not going to be any snow, not going to be ice. The conditions are going to be fine on the field. You have, to me, in Miami, while they may not win this game, their ability to be able to hit the home run, right? Whether it's A-Chain, whether it's Mostert, whether it's Hill, their ability to be able to score and score quickly is what I think is the driving factor behind this rising. And I do think it's going to be a lot of running. I don't think it's going to be on Tua's arm to throw 60-yard bombs here, and hopefully Hill catches them. I think they're going to scheme ways to be able to get their speed going up against that defense of Kansas City, and I think points will be coming in this one here. I'm in favor. I agree with the market. I think this thing is going over. I think Kansas City, with a week off, will have success against that makeshift defense of Miami. Ultimately, though, it's really Kansas City's to lose here.
Market movement both on that total and in the spread. It opened at 3.5, and because of the defensive issues and the numerous injuries for Miami, now a 4.5-point number in favor of Kansas City. Those are the two games on Saturday. Now we get to Sunday. 3 games, a triple header of playoff football. The largest spread of wild card weekend, double digits in favor of Buffalo against the Pittsburgh Steelers. You mentioned the weather in KC, similar bad weather in Western New York, an over-under of 36.5. A double-digit spread, Joe, in favor of the Bills. Will this game be as easy for Buffalo as the odds makers expect?
So we were covering this game Sunday night. Blewett and I were talking about this, and we said, please, we were trying to figure out whether or not Miami would win. Would they go to would it be Buffalo? Would Buffalo go home? Because, Mike Blewett and his Steelers. And then we looked at the weather report and we were laughing and we're going, all right, as soon as this number comes out, bet the damn under. Well, it opened up at 42, and now you can see the numbers all the way down to 36. And it's all about the wind here off the lake in Orchard Park. And it may be a little warmer, it may be a little colder, but that is not going to affect what happens in this game. 25-mile-per-hour winds consistently is what's going to affect this game. Don't forget, back in 2021, we saw a very similar wind situation in Orchard Park with the Patriots. And if you remember that game there, I believe Mac Jones threw 2 balls the entire game. 2. That was it. It was a running game. It's exactly what it's going to be here. And if you've noticed with Buffalo, yeah, their ability to be able to run the ball since their bye week is really what has changed this offense. No TJ Watt. Yeah, there's no Pittsburgh for me. It's the under and Buffalo.
It's going to be interesting to see how it does play out because, again, we're not talking about like, hey, this is October where it's like 45 degrees. It's 22 degrees at kickoff here with 25-mile-an-hour winds. So that's going to put it in that freezing range of around 0 real feel. It'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. This next game here, Joe, we're not worried about any temperatures here. This is down at Jerry World, AT&T Stadium, Green Bay, and Dallas. The line opened up at 7 at FanDuel. Now we sit at 7.5 as a favorite to the Dallas Cowboys. The total opened up at 49, now up to 50.5. Jordan Love playing very good football this year for the Packers, but the Dallas Cowboys seemingly insurmountable to beat at home. Can that give this weekend, or maybe Green Bay just stays inside that number, Joe?
Well, it feels like this is maybe one of the better shootouts of the card here this weekend here. But it's interesting too because there's only been 10 quarterbacks to have played their first playoff game and be a touchdown or more underdog and actually win. And you've got to go back to, you ready for these names? Marcus Mariota in 2018 and Tim Tebow in 2012 are the only 2 quarterbacks to actually win a playoff game in their first time being more than a touchdown dog. I don't see Jordan Love getting this done. However, who trusts the Cowboys here, really? I do trust the Cowboys. I'll tell you what, in the first half, averaging 17.5 points a game in this spot all season long, Cowboys are going to score, and they're going to score early. So I'm looking at them early in this one, too. I'm taking them in the first half.
Of course, Dallas is perfect at home this year, 8-0, the only undefeated team at home this year in the National Football League. 16 consecutive wins at the start, dating back to last year, 6-2 against the spread as a home favorite this year. Green Bay 6-4 ATS when booked as an underdog. Sunday Night Football, a matchup, a reunion, a historic night in the Motor City. It's the Lions and the Rams. Matthew Stafford makes his return after 12 years in Detroit. Jared Goff goes up against his former head coach in Sean McVay. So storylines and narratives, Joe, but also the numbers. 3-point spread in favor of Detroit, over under 51.5. What do you like the most?
Crazy trends here, right? You've got Jared Goff, right, with the history with the Rams, but he's also the single most profitable indoor quarterback over the last decade by far. And then you have Matt Stafford, who is single-handedly the worst quarterback as an underdog. 29-74 straight up as a dog in his career, including 1-9 over the last two seasons. You want to talk about two totally opposites, but one guy's got the ring, the other guy doesn't here. So I thought the hook was a pretty good value there with the Rams. I took it, 3.5. It's down to 3. If it gets any lower, I wouldn't mind teasing the Rams up and over 8.5.
The highest total of the weekend as well at 51.5. What it all means for the outlook this postseason. Up next.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, a Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I
favorite.
don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression this season. Not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats, if you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5. This was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The NFL playoffs begin this weekend. 6 matchups on Super Wild Card weekend with 2 teams earning a much-needed bye week. We will continue to preview the matchups that we have, what it means for the postseason, how it all factors in to the outlook. Joe, we got 5 of the 6 games on Super Wild Card weekend in our previous segment together. Raineri joins us for a second straight segment. We finish with the Monday Night Football finale in Tampa Bay. It's the Eagles and the Buccaneers. Like the first game of the weekend, where the top wild card seed in the AFC in Cleveland is a road favorite against the AFC South Divisional champ in Houston. Same story to end out Super Wild Card weekend on Monday night. The Eagles, the top wild card seed, that 5 spot in the NFC, a road favorite in Tampa against the NFC South Divisional champ, the Buccaneers, who won the division for a 3rd consecutive season. Over-under is 43.5. Of course, Joe, the Birds do not enter playing their best football. Will they figure it out against Tampa Bay to start off the postseason?
This is an ugly game. It is without a doubt the ugliest of ugly here this first opening week of the playoffs here. What can you say about the Eagles besides them down the stretch going 1-5 straight up, 0-6 against the number, and somehow me cashing the under 11.5 win total on the Eagles this year? I still have no idea how that happened, but kudos. The luck is run out. Injuries are the big concern on both sides of the ball here, right? That's really what exactly are we going to get from Jalen Hurts with a dislocated finger, right? And who the hell is he throwing to? A.J. Brown? Is he going? Is he not? Devonta Smith didn't go in the last game. Is he going to be good enough? Are you going to have to rely solely on trying to run the ball, which, quite honestly, is the best part of that defense of Tampa? This is just a terrible game, which is why my first look and first bet on this game was towards the under at 43.5, 44, because quite honestly, I don't know how we're getting some points here. Baker Mayfield totally banged up, but it's not going to stop him from trying to take advantage of that porous Eagles secondary there. So Mike Evans has been an immovable force all season long. It's not like that Eagles secondary has been fantastic here down the stretch. That defense has a lot of holes in it because of injuries here. So I think it's a one-score game one way or the other. The only way I would look is maybe Tampa and maybe tease them up, because I don't think this is going to be a runaway or a blowout for the Eagles. I also don't think it comes anywhere close to the 43.5, 44 points.
Yeah, if you looked at this game and said, hey, I'm just going to bet this game in a vacuum, you'd say, all right, if the Eagles were healthy, Tampa's healthy. You probably just would go back to the game they played early in the season in Tampa Bay where the Eagles dominated. But as Joe puts out, that's not the case. The Eagles have been terrible down the stretch and getting worse. Maybe you wipe the slate clean, but certainly trusting the Philadelphia Eagles is hard to do. But the odds makers are as a minus 3-point favorite now at the FanDuel Sportsbook. Joe, let's flip it back over to the AFC and take a look at the entire picture there, where the Baltimore Ravens are the favorites to make it to the Super Bowl at a plus 125 number. The Buffalo Bills just behind them as the number 2 seed at a plus 280 price. Kansas City plus 490. Then we have that fall off to the Dolphins, Browns, Texans, and Steelers. Is there value outside of the top of that board? Cleveland Browns, Houston Texans, Pittsburgh Steelers. How are you playing the AFC here?
Well, I mean, if you're going to spend any time with the Bills, for instance, the value is long gone. You could have got them guys at a, almost 20-1 in December, if you can believe that. I mean, the Bills were just absolutely in shambles, and then all of a sudden rattled off all the wins, and now here they are sitting as the 2 seed. So there's no value in looking at betting the top of the board. The question I think we all have to ask ourselves in the AFC, and we'll know Saturday, is how serious should we be taking the Cleveland Browns here? And as crazy as it may sound, the Browns have a championship caliber defense. They have an experienced quarterback, and they can throw and run the ball. The idea that all of this without Nick Chubb is kind of mind-blowing, so kudos to Stefanski and company here, but we know that this goes because of that defense. And their path, not as difficult as you think it is here once they get past Houston. They've got a shot here. So the only future on that board in the AFC that I would consider at a pretty decent price is the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, absolutely so. We will see what Cleveland has in store. Of course, Joe mentioned it when breaking down the game. The Browns and the Texans played each other week number 16. You might be thinking to yourself, well, there's a sample size that happened not all that long ago down the home stretch of this season when both teams were battling it out for postseason positioning. Well, C.J. Stroud did not play in that football game, but Joe Flacco did. He threw for 368 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 INTs, and, of course, 368, but 265 of them and 2 scores to Amari Cooper, who had a huge game in week number 16 in Houston. Cooper's receiving yards prop for Saturday is 78.5. Now we look at the NFC Championship odds, where the San Francisco 49ers are the number 1 overall seed. And not just that, Joe, not just the open weekend here to start off the playoffs, not just home field advantage, but an odds-on favorite, minus money for the 49ers before the playoffs even fully get underway. Do you agree with the odds makers making San Francisco an odds-on minus money favorite to win a conference championship in the NFC?
Yes, obviously, I think the 49ers have shown time and time again this year that they are the best team on that side of the bracket. I will say this, though, if you're looking for value, then make up your mind who wins that Detroit Rams game and bet that team right now to win it all, because that's what's left. So Eagles just can't. They're a shell of themselves. Tampa, listen, even if they beat the hobbled Eagles, where are they going here? But if you have the Rams winning on the road in Detroit, well, then you better have the Rams moving on, because that is a team, I think, that can certainly, they're underrated defensively. I mean, they got one of the best players in the league there in Aaron Donald right there. They have experience. They're young, and they've got Stafford and an offense that can score with anybody. If you think they get by Detroit, then there's no reason for you not to take them to win it all. And same thing with Detroit. If you think Detroit's going to win that game, then why is Detroit? We were just talking about it off air. They're going to go to Dallas if they win this game, another indoor stadium in which Jared Goff has been absolute money over the last decade. So I got no problem with either of those two.
Yeah, it's just that the Rams actually go into Detroit and win that game. And keep in mind also, like we talked about Cleveland earlier, they took the bye week last week. When they match up with the San Francisco 49ers, Joe, there's no surprises there. Like, those two teams know each other like the back end of a book here. They'll be able to really get after it. Some interesting stuff, no doubt about it, in the NFC. But if we preview the Super Bowl matchups here at the FanDuel Sportsbook, the shortest odds to get there, obviously, both number 1 seeds here. That's the Ravens and the 49ers at a plus 290 price. Are you looking down the board here at all, Joe Raineri, or will it be chalk when it's all said and done entering into the Super Bowl?
Yeah, it's usually always chalk, isn't it? But it's interesting. I think the teams that can throw a wrench in it, I think we just identified Cleveland in the AFC, of course, and who better to know the Ravens than the Cleveland Browns? And you mentioned it, the Rams. Who better to handle the 49ers and a team that plays them twice a year and knows them better than anybody? And I will say this also, the Rams have already shown it doesn't have to be indoors. Don't forget, they lost a game in Baltimore in the weather, in conditions, in rain, and barely lost in overtime, but still dropped 30 on that defense. So the Rams are fully capable of going on the road outdoors there in San Francisco and winning it. So yeah, I think if you're looking to get exotic, you include either the Rams and Cleveland facing one another if you want to go that way for a big ticket.
Ooh, a 6 seed out of the NFC, LA, the 5 seed out of the AFC, that would be Cleveland. It is really interesting when you look at the Super Bowl 58 odds just outright. The Niners, of course, the favorites plus 220. Only $1 behind is Baltimore at plus 320. Two other teams with three digits in their number, Buffalo plus 650, Dallas plus 750. And then the two teams that faced off in Super Bowl 57 for a good majority of the year, we thought they would probably be back, the Chiefs and the Eagles. KC at 10-1, Philly at 17-1. The Dolphins also a 17-1 number. How about the individual markets for the long-term look in this postseason as well, Joe, where the individuals will obviously influence the outcome from that team perspective? There are markets to bet players to lead the entirety of the NFL playoffs in their certain yards component. Like Dak Prescott, for instance, has the shortest number to lead the National Football League in passing yards this postseason at 2-1. CeeDee Lamb, his guy, also 2-1. So plus 250 for Dak, 2-1 for CeeDee Lamb there for the leader in terms of the receiving yards component in this NFL postseason. So, Joe, if there are teams that are going to make that push to a conference championship game, maybe even a Super Bowl 58 appearance, which one of those duos will lead the way?
Yeah, it's, I mean, the season CeeDee Lamb is having this year is just, it's remarkable, guys, how good he has been here, him and Dak Prescott. Now, again, a lot of that had to do with beating up some of the lesser teams here, certainly defensively, but still, those numbers have been gaudy. So I get why they would be the price they are at here. Unfortunately for Tua and Tyreek Hill, would have been fun seeing them go at it if everyone was healthy and it was in Miami, but that's not going to happen. But call me crazy. Would anybody be shocked if all of a sudden Josh Allen and Diggs turned it up a notch here in the playoffs and went back to being who they are, which is possible. I mean, it's going to be tough in 25-degree weather, but after that, or 25-mile-per-hour winds. But the problem with Purdy to me, Ben, is it Ayuk or is it Deebo Samuel or is it going to be Christian McCaffrey? That's the problem with the 49ers is they have four dudes that you could mix and match in that combination and it would still be profitable. So I think Dak and CeeDee Lamb are the favorites and deserve to be.
Yeah, and again, your point brought up there, very valid. Where are they actually playing here? Because if everybody was playing in a dome, like, yeah, let's go, Stephon Diggs. But we even saw that on Sunday night with no weather concerns. Stephon Diggs was open for an 80-yard-plus touchdown pass that got airmailed by Josh Allen. Might be a little bit tougher, again, under the conditions in Western New York coming up this weekend. Let's take a look at most playoff rushing yards. Of course, at the FanDuel Sportsbook, Christian McCaffrey is going to be your favorite at a 2-1 price. Behind him, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills, 5-1. Tony Pollard, 6-1. Kyron Williams at 10-1. And again, you have to measure how far you think these football teams are going. In your eyes, for this market here, Joe, where would you go with a rushing prospect here?
It's interesting, too, right? I mean, Swift's on that list, and, of course, he's probably going to have to carry this team for a little while. But how about Gibbs and Montgomery? Everyone thought Gibbs was just going to take over the rushing for Detroit, and yet been a really good receiver out of the backfield. It's been Montgomery as the workhorse, and you got to look at that combination if you think Detroit can make a run at this. But I think Cook is probably where the value is here because of the Buffalo effort since the bye to make sure they can run the ball, including with Josh Allen.
Let's just bring this up. Again, Kansas City not seen as favorably as they were a year ago, but Isaiah Pacheco was key in that run to a Super Bowl 57 championship. 95 yards against Jacksonville in the division round, 76 in Super Bowl 57, a 12-1 number. Joe Raineri, we will see you tonight on Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, live right here on the Grid. Up next, we end out hour number 2 here on the early line.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I
favorite.
don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars had, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. It's not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
We end out this second hour of a Thursday Live right here on the early line on SportsGrid and all across the SportsGrid network. I am Ben, he is Donnie, and you need the SportsGrid app. When this much news can break in a 24-hour window in the sports landscape, you scan the QR code on your screen or you download the SportsGrid app at the Apple or the Play Store so you can stay up to date with everything and in the know. And speaking of what has been a wild 24 hours that has left us all trying to wrap our heads around a new future in football at the NFL and college levels, which coaching news was the most surprising? Was it Bill Belichick and New England parting ways? Pete Carroll's tenure after 14 years with the Seahawks coming to a close? Or Nick Saban retiring at Alabama? That was the question for the people out there in Fade the Public. So, Donnie, at SportsGrid TV on Twitter, which coaching news shocked you the most? Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, or Pete Carroll? And most of the public, nearly 71% of the public, saying it was Nick Saban's decision to retire. After 17 years at Alabama, 28 years in total as a head coach in college football, retiring from the sport that he has dominated pretty much for the better part of the last 2.5 decades. Donnie, are you fading the public?
No, I'm not going to fade the public. They nailed this one on Nick Saban. 71, close to 71% of the votes coming on him, and rightfully so. But it is interesting how the actual poll breaks down, Ben, where Bill Belichick leaving the New England Patriots only got just about 4.6% of the vote here. It's kind of stunning here, but it just goes to show you, we didn't expect Nick Saban leaving. We expected Bill Belichick to probably be separation here from the New England Patriots. It still is shocking news that the Tide won't have Saban as their head coach.
It is crazy when something, even when expected, happens because you reflect and you look back. But we thought Bill Belichick was going to leave New England. Pete Carroll was a stunner, but none more shocking than Nick Saban retiring from college football. Plenty of conversation coming your way when Hour 3 starts in 55 seconds.